So the word terminal comes from the Latin word terminus, meaning a boundary. We started using that word probably for electronics and electrical. For electrical, that would be like your house and the electric grid. You're not going to draw a schematic for your house that includes the entire electric grid. You don't have to do that. You just have to say, this is the terminal where I'm going to be getting my power in through. This goes out to the power grid. And inside on this side, I have my house wiring. And then you just draw your house wiring. I've also got a video where I talked about an analog security alarm system. And there I talked about different modules, what you would have. And you would connect those modules by terminal wires that cross those boundaries. And computers, we've used that term as well. So we've got three different words that we're going to use to describe. There's three different words where terminal applies. Two of those are proper descriptions and one is a slang description. The first one I'm going to talk about on here is the physical terminal. And that is where the human, you end, your fingertips end, and the keyboard, the computer, begins. That's where you're supposed to interact with it through. So that's your screen, your keyboard, your mouse. It would also include things like your fingerprint sensor, your webcam, your speaker, your microphone, disk drives, everything which you're using to interact with that computer, everything that computer knows how to read, including even your indicator lights. That's also a part of that terminal. That's where you're supposed to be able to see what's going on. You're supposed to be able to tell it what you want it to do. So that's the physical terminal. There's also the virtual terminal. That is where the hardware ends and the software begins. I did a video where I showed three types, and I compared these types of virtual terminal modes. And those were mainly directed at PCs, but it can also be applied to your phone as well. Your phone is normally a GUI interface. When you start up, you have different modes that you're going to go through. And what it chooses to go on into is going to depend on what it's been programmed to do. On Linux, you can go on into, you're going to have the BIOS start, and it's going to be whatever its mode is. You're going to go on into grub, and it's going to go on into the kernel. And the kernel is usually, grub and kernel are both CUI. They're multicolor. They change the colors. That's one indication of a CUI versus CLI. And then they give you your login, that's now a CLI. And then it goes to bash. And that is that's a CLI. You can go into there, it depends on what it wants to do. How exactly do you have it set up? Some of them, they go directly into a graphical. They don't even go past that, but that's kind of rare. Normally they will go through the text-based and into, which the text-based is both CLI or CUI. They'll go into one or the other of those, and then they'll launch the GUI, is most common. But it is possible to go directly into GUI from the kernel. Alright, so that's your virtual terminal, though, is what shows up at that point. What you're seeing on the screen, what you're interacting with, and how it interacts depends on the mode. And there's additional other types of virtual terminals, like your boxes that you tell them what you want to look up online. Hey, how do I bake a potato? And it looks it up and it tells you, throw it in the oven, wrap it in foil, throw it in the oven at 400 degrees for an hour. And that process That's also the virtual terminal. It's not a graphical type. It's reading your audio, and then it processes that, and it outputs it via audio back to you. Or maybe it does some other output, such as dimming your lights, turning on fans, activating security, whatever it does. Anyway, the point is those are types of terminals. But one other one that gets called slangly, it's improper to really call it terminal, but we oftentimes do, and we also oftentimes call it console. That console is it's more dealing with the physical hardware and how that's set up. Is your console, is your more proper word for console, but shell is oftentimes called terminal or console by slang, but it's properly shell, and that's where you're going to, that's like bash. There's a whole bunch of different types that are like that, but those are programs that will read a command and do a command and output an output. They may also stay running and continue to output and continue to read further inputs. But that's where the shell is actually the program that handles that. That's what bash is. It's actually a program that will handle that. So the actual output that you're seeing is terminal, and that's why it gets that slang. The output seen from bash is a terminal that is shown on the physical console. So that's where it also gets that slang. But it is technically, it's a shell program. When you're talking about, what command do I need to use to do this, that's dealing with the shell program that is reading that input from that terminal and doing the things that it needs to do from that input, creating those outputs, running those programs, doing that processing. That's the bash process that handles that. Thank you for watching.